Hi guys, welcome back to the channel. Today we have in a Ford Transit Custom on a 2017 reg, and this one, the brake pedal has gone rock hard whilst driving and has been recovered into me to get the fault rectified. So let's get started and I'll show you what the problem is and how to diagnose it and how to fix it. So these Ford Transit Customs, I've seen a few of these now, where the brake pedal goes rock hard whilst driving, and what happens is the vacuum pump on the engine gives up. Sometimes this is because the wet belt fibres break down and they go into the oil, which then goes up into the vacuum pump and causes it to wear or just break. So how do we test it and how do we fix it? First of all, if you come into the engine bay and on the brake servo, just down here, you can see the servo pipe that goes into it there. We're going to pull that out and then we're going to start up the engine. When we start the engine, that should create a vacuum and be sucking on the end of your finger when you put your finger on it. So what you want to do is start the engine, and then we're going to pull out this pipe and we're going to just stick our finger on the end of it, and this one has no vacuum whatsoever. So that would indicate that our vacuum pump has failed. So now we know that we have no vacuum. We're going to go over to the right hand side here, and the vacuum pump is buried just under there. So what we're going to do is we're going to take off all of our airbox and all of the pipes that need to come off to get access to the vacuum pump, and then I'll show you how to take it off, and then we'll get it on the bench and have a look and see why it's failed. So to gain access to our vacuum pump down there, we are going to have to start by taking off this airbox. So if we undo this Jubilee clip to the top of the airbox, and we're going to take off the airflow sensor wire, and then you've just got these little plastic clips all the way around, and one pipe which we just pinch together and pull off. Pull off your pipe for the top of the airbox there, and the top cover just comes straight out. And take out our air filter, which this one definitely needs changing. And now we want to take out the airbox itself. We do have our DPF pressure sensor on the side here, which is held on with one 8mm. So we're just going to undo this 8mm bolt. We're just going to put the bolt back in its hole so we don't lose it. And now what we can do is just pull the airbox towards us, because in here there's some larger holes which it will just come out of like that, and it just pulls all the way out, secures on a bar at the back here, and obviously we're going to empty this all out and clean it. So now you can see we've got a lot more access area down here, and our vacuum pump is right down this side here. You've got one pipe on the top of the vacuum pump and another pipe on the top of the vacuum pump towards you. But what we need to do is take all these pipes and this bracket out of the way so we can gain access to the bolts for the vacuum pump. So if we just remove these two pipes out of the way, and then we can gain access to this bracket in front of the servo, or the vacuum pump, sorry. So on this bracket in front of the servo pump, there's a couple of 10mm bolts holding the bracket on. So once you've undone the two 10mm that hold the bracket, you've got two 8mm that hold this little stepper motor thing on top. Once you've undone those, this becomes free. And there's another pipe just on the top of the bracket here. If you get a trim tool like this, makes life easier. Once you've got those two things off the top of the bracket should slide off and slide out the way. It is connected to two wires. You can unplug them and move it completely out of the way, or just leave it hanging down. So if you want a closer look, This pipe here needs to come off the bracket, and this setup here needs to come off the bracket, and just underneath there you'll see the vacuum pump. That is held on with, I think it's 3 8mm bolts and 2 pipes. So now we need to undo those, and then we'll be able to pull it off the side of the engine. So to get the vacuum pipe out the top of here, you push down this red collar, and then wiggle the pipe up. Just like that. And then we can move that pipe out the way. And the other pipe that is on the servo is a squeeze together type, so you squeeze it together and then pull it off. Just get our fingers behind it, and we can just pull that one off and move it out of the way. So now we have nothing attached to the servo motor itself. And what we can then do is get our 8mm, I'm using a 1/4 drive on an extension, and we can just undo the 3 securing bolts that hold the servo to the engine. Some of the nuts or the bolts you won't be able to see, so just feel around it with your hands, and then you'll be able to get on it. One more. If you pull this foam cover up on the top just slightly, you'll be able to see the top bolt securing it on. And that's our 3rd bolt out. Now the vacuum pump will be free. So what we can do is, the easiest way is to pull it out from the bottom and then slide it out towards you, and then up and over the pipes, just like this. And we can already see all of the cam belt fibres that are going to be blocking up these oil ways. And if we were to look behind this back cover, we would see that as well. In fact, we'll take that off and we'll have a look on the bench just to show you. But what happens is this sits inside the cam lobe and it spins, and it's supposed to spin freely, but this one, I can barely turn it by hand. So this is definitely 100% going to be the fault. We'll take it over to the bench now and we'll crack it open and we'll have a look inside and see what's happening. Bear in mind, there is a gasket that goes on here. Our one has fell down, but you will get a new gasket to go back on with when we get our new one. So let's go over to the bench and crack it open. Okay, so now we're over at the bench. You can see vacuum pump, our gasket, and this is what's actually happened. If you put your finger into the hole where this come out of, you'll find that the part that actually sits in the cam, this one has broken in 2. Which is a complete failure. So we're going to take those out, and that will have broken because this is unable to turn. So let's take this apart and have a look. So if we take all these 25 Torxes out the back of this vacuum pump, we're just going to prise it off gently. Oh wow, okay, so this is one of the worst ones I've seen, but as you can see here, this is the internal part of the vacuum pump that's supposed to spin around creating the vacuum. And as you can see there, that is completely broken off. So let's just clean this out so we can get a better look inside. So as you can see, we've got more parts of the internals coming out, all broken. And this is the center part here. So that plastic part is meant to sit in here, and as this rotates around like this, it's supposed to go around the outer edge and create a vacuum. But this one is full of all of the debris from the wet belt breaking down, so we're going to have to perform a wet belt replacement on this vehicle as well. Flush the engine oil and just give it a really good clean up so this doesn't happen again. So there you have it. That is the main cause of the brake pedal going hard in your Ford Transits, your customs. So now we're just going to get our new one and we're going to fit it back on the vehicle, and we'll start it up, and then we'll put our finger over that pipe and I'll show you exactly what's supposed to happen. So now we have our brand new vacuum pump, which will look like this, and you get a new gasket as well. As you can see, this one is all nice and clean and not full of cam belt material. So what we're going to do now is we're going to take this, put it back on the Transit, and then when we start it up, I'll show you exactly how to test to make sure it's working properly. Right, so now we're back over at the van. You want to put your finger onto the end of the cam to find out the orientation that this needs to be for when you go back on. Mine is sitting quite straight, so when I go back on like this, it should slot into the back of the cam. So we just go over the pipes, then underneath the exact same way that we came out. And we're just going to try and line the vacuum pump up. So again, if you slide the top in first and then the bottom, then you can wiggle it and it should pop into place, and you'll know when it's seated because it will sit flush against the head. And after much wiggling around, if you need to, take it out and reset it so it lines up. Once it is lined up, we can then get our 8mm bolts and go back in. So I'm just going to get all three of these 8mm bolts started, so then we can do it up, and when we do it up, we're going to do it up nice and evenly so it clamps the gasket down so we don't get any leaks. Once all three of them are started, we can then get our 8mm on a socket, and we're just going to do them up. So firstly, we're just going to nip them all up so they're just tight. Once they're all nipped up, we can then just tighten it down so it crushes the gasket nice and evenly, and we shouldn't have any leaks whatsoever. Just like that. So now all three of our bolts are tight for the vacuum pump. We can take out our little blanks in the vacuum pump. Let's stop all the crap getting in it, and then we can put our two pipes back onto the vacuum pump straight away so we don't get any dirt or debris going in there. Then the next thing to do is to get your bracket and put your bracket back on, so the bracket actually locates onto the lower securing bolts of the vacuum pump. Then we can get our 10mm nuts and carefully pop them back on. Make sure you don't drop them into the engine bay. because they are a nightmare to find. Not as bad to find as your 10mm socket would be, because they just disappear. Then we can do up our two 10mm nuts for the bracket. Now our bracket is nice and tight, we can go ahead and clip in our top hose there, and this little motor with a hose on the top. We can put our two 8mm bolts back in there. So now we have everything down here back on and bolted up. We can just put our pipes back into position and push them in to their little securing clamps. And now we can go ahead and get our airbox and pop that back on as well. So now with our airbox, we're going to line it up with the pole that it sits on at the back. And we'll line it up with the two holes in the slam panel at the front. And you want to push down and backwards. And then these rubbers will then locate into their little holders, like so. And also it will locate in the pole in the back. We can put on our lower air intake pipe here. Then we take our DPF pressure sensor and just put that back in on the side. We don't have a new air filter yet, so we're just going to pop the old air filter back in so we can test it. And then take your top cover, slide the lugs into the back and press it down and do up the little clips. They just push on like so. Get your air intake pipe and slide that back on. Do up your Jubilee clip, plug in your airflow meter and re-secure the wiring. And lastly, we have our little pipe that goes on the side of the airbox here, which just clips on. Then after any job, just have a good look around and make sure that you haven't missed anything off. And then what we're going to do is we're going to start the vehicle up, and then we're going to go back over to that pipe in the brake servo, and I'm going to show you that it's sucking like a good one. So we just start up the vehicle, and already I can hear it. So can you hear this pipe? So this pipe here goes to the brake servo, and that is sucking really, really well. So we just want to pop that back into the brake servo. Like so. Push that in nicely. So that's just sitting back in the brake servo there. And the last thing to test is to see if your brake pedal, brilliant. So there you have it. If you've got a solid brake pedal with no brakes in your Ford Transit Custom, likelihood is going to be the vacuum pump has failed, and that is exactly how you diagnose and replace your vacuum pump so you can get back on the road, get back to work. And if you like this video, hit that thumbs up, hit that subscribe button, and I'll see you in the next one.